Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves and thank you for joining the DSM Discovery Group. We are a group of community leaders in different locations who are connected with our shared desire for community problem solving for our organizations, for our leadership, as well as our communities. And what's been interesting, again, is how with the shift to online last spring, we found that conference room size and geography are no longer barriers for people who have the same concerns for creative problem solving to connect across communities. Now, every month, some topics may be more connected to us or more interesting to us than others. But the reason why we join is not whether a topic particularly interests us, but the perspectives we learn when we gain when we gather together across disciplines, across perspectives, and associate ideas and learn how they might apply in our own circumstance and situation. We meet on the third Wednesday of every month at 7:30 Central Time. And if you have ideas for an upcoming meeting, be sure and let me know. Would love to talk to you about this. So we have this morning, we are glad to have Umar Shiraz from Islamabad, Pakistan. Umar Shiraz began coming to our meetings last September, and we were very glad to get to know him and learn from him and his insights. Umar is a senior research officer at the Center for Policy Studies at Comsat University in Islamabad. He's an innovation policy analyst and futurist, social change researcher, and foresight practitioner. And he's the founding blog editor of the Journal of Future Studies and has applied and taught strategic foresight and scenario planning for the last 13 years. He's designed and led dozens of international foresight and scenario planning workshops in Pakistan, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Iran, and Nepal to facilitate the making of real-world decisions by corporations, governments, and universities. And so we are privileged to have you joining us, Umar. So I will turn the meeting over to you, and you are going to speak to us about exploring the future and our future assumptions. So, welcome.
Thank you very much for those warm words, Fred. Yeah, let's get started. Could you please, I need to share my PowerPoint. Could you just give me access?
Okay, got you set.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Hang on a second, let me just. Okay, let me just share my screen and let's begin. All right, thank you very much, Fred. Thank you very much for creating this dialogue space, and thank you for all the participants for gracing, for honoring me and with your presence. For the next 1.5 hours, we'll be talking about future and its assumptions, and yeah, I'll be talking about this topic. But before I start talking about it, let me hear something from you. I mean, what brings you here? I mean, why are we interested in the future? Why should we be even thinking about it? What's so special about it? If you could kindly share some of your comments in the chat box, I think let's try to begin this conversation. Instead of me boring you with my lecture, let's hear from you. Why should we think about the future? Anybody?
Okay. Because we have hope that things can be better and that we can influence it.
Beautiful. That's great. Okay. I just saw Kelly with a child. I mean, my answer would be it's for them.
You read
it's for them, the future. Yeah.
Okay, I'd say because we have to start preparing for it today.
Beautiful. That's great. We have a responsibility to, in the chat box, we are getting some good comments. Let me read out some of them. And okay, we have a responsibility to our kids to leave them something to work with. That's a beautiful thing to start with. Yes, we have a responsibility to our kids to be good ancestors. It's coming so fast and so much has so much possibility. Wonderful. I have children. The future is something what under our control, what we do now impacts future generations, as you just said. Beautiful. We start today creating the future. The decision we make today impact the future. Wow, that is beautiful. We are role models for future generations. Wow, wow. So some great comments over here, and that's, I think, a good way to actually to get started. So thank you very much for all your feedback. I'm sorry I can't read each and every one of all those comments, but thank you very much. And I think this is a good place to actually get started. That today was a future yesterday, or today, this moment right now, which we're living, was a future a few minutes ago. But Fred and I, we try to create this future. Okay, so we got together, all the logistics, all the invitations, setting up on Eventbrite and all, inviting people and all. So we actually created this future, and now we are living the future which we try to create. So all your answers which are saying there's nothing right or wrong about them, but again, the preferred future that we want to create, that we want to live tomorrow, that we want to create for our kids, we need to start working for it today, so that tomorrow when they live in it, they can remember us as good ancestors. I mean, think of it this way, that 50 years from now, if you have kids, for example, if you have kids now, and 50 years from now, they're looking back in time and they're looking out of the window and they're saying, wow, this is the world which we're living in. What sort of a world do you imagine? What sort of a world do we anticipate would be happening? Would they be living a worst case scenario? Would they be living a future in which they'll remember us as good ancestors? That is a question for all of us. And that's why it's important to think about the future. Okay. So we'll be talking about the future. I like to use the analogy of futures with, a voyage on a ship. So imagine yourself, warm, sunny day, you're standing in front of the steering wheel of a ship. Now, you would be certainly thinking about a few things, that if I am going on a voyage in a ship, what do I need to do? So put yourself in those shoes, in the shoes of a captain of a ship. How would you prepare for a voyage? Would you prepare during the journey? Because by then it's too late. You'd certainly be doing something beforehand. And you try to anticipate what all would come in that journey. So for example, if there are pirates on the way, you would, then have to plan in advance that, maybe I should divert, maybe hire some mercenaries, maybe have some arms, or maybe have a convoy around me. If there's a long journey, perhaps, have sufficient supplies of, water, sufficient supplies of food, other things you might need. But you need to do that before you embark on your journey, not during it, because during it you can do nothing. Or there's very limited few opportunities which you have over there. So I like to use this analogy when I talk about the future. Think of it as a voyage, and we need to prepare beforehand, all right? And if there are any questions, just please asking me, stop me, and I'll try to address your question. Before we get to our particular topic which we want to talk about, just a few general rules about, rules of thumb about, thinking about the future. Now, this on your screen is a advertisement from 1962, and it's a 2-page spread. And it says, like, each day, Humble supplies enough energy to melt 7 million tons of glacier. Now, I have a question for you. Would you use such an advertisement today to sell your product? Unless, of course, you're doing shock marketing. Yes or no? Would you use such an advertisement today? Anybody? Okay, I see a lot of heads shaking. Okay, no, you wouldn't. Okay. Why so? I mean, in 1962, it was fine. I mean, 1962, this was acceptable, 2-page spread. What changed? What's the matter now? Anybody?
I could say, I think we understand that this is not a positive thing, that our glaciers are, they're melting, the sea level's rising, it's impacting people. We have climate refugees now. So this is not, this actually turned out to be a bad idea, I think is why I wouldn't show it now.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, because climate change is now so much set, so much has been talked about it. So much has been said about it. The whole world is in motion. Even Joe Biden, when he came to office, one of the main things which he, during his election campaign, also he talked about climate change and how he'd be, reversing some of the things which President Donald Trump had been doing. So, but for some point in time, this was acceptable enough. So think about this as rule number one, as one way of looking about the future. what we think is acceptable or unacceptable today might be different tomorrow. I'm using the word might be because, and most of you, when I look at you, are senior enough, have seen so much in life that you have seen changes in trends, changes in society, culture, what is acceptable for us, female rights, the Black Lives Matter, climate change, lots of things which have happened during our lifetime, which have changed, the perceptions of which have changed. So rule number one, what is acceptable or unacceptable today, what we consider right or wrong today might be different tomorrow. Okay, so that's one. Then here is another advertisement from from yesteryear, and let me see if I can let's see if I can actually. I mean, if you read right on top of it, it says about 313,597 doctors from coast to coast were asked. And they say that, cigarette smoking is so good for you and this is so great for you. Okay. I mean, when you look at this, how do we make up our minds about any particular theme or topic? The two things, essentially, and there could be other variables as well. What are the experts talking about? So doctor is an expert on health, and how many of them are saying the same thing? Okay, that's how we usually make up our minds about any particular topic, whether it's COVID, vaccination, any other topic, who to give votes to. We look at some particular expert, and then how many of them are saying this. But we know today that this is wrong. When was the last time you saw a cigarette ad? I mean, in Pakistan, I think it was about 25 years ago. But at some point in time, this was considered so acceptable, even medical authorities would, use themselves as an ad. Okay, so the question about expertise, expert-led evidence. I hear a lot about people saying about evidence-based information and evidence-based, policy making. I'm not against it, but what I suggest, and consider this as one of the tenets of futures thinking, we look at what the experts are saying, but then we also look at what are the other alternative scenarios. What other thing could also happen? Okay. So just to give you an example, and I realize that some of you must be a little uneasy by now. Okay, foresight and futures is not about making people comfortable. It's about being uneasy because it's about the future and it's uncertain. Okay, and it's happening so fast. So, for example, 5 years ago, when having these elections between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in Pakistan, the viewpoint was Hillary would win. And even in our talk shows, every expert would be saying, she'll be in power. We need to think around her policies and how do we circulate ourselves, look at ourselves for that particular change. Nobody was thinking about a future in which Donald Trump would be the president. And then it came as a shock. Okay, and we can give so many other examples of things which have happened in the recent past. So Brexit, for example, is an example. COVID. I mean, how many authorities? And the terrible things which have been unleashed during the COVID pandemic, because experts said so would happen, and no, nothing would happen. We followed their what they said blindly. There was no second or third scenario to look at. All right. So yeah, and I see a comment. Let me look into it. Okay, looking forward to a zoo becoming illegal in the near future. Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Okay, and we just now looked at a doctor. A doctor is a specialist, okay, the expert. Please do not, go tomorrow and say, there was this gentleman who came and he told us that, we should not look at a doctor. But many of us, I mean, myself and, if you could also, share comments on this, there would be many people, even within this group, who might have used alternative sources of gathering information about any particular ailment or any particular medicine or before taking any surgery. Okay. For example, there'll be many people now, so doctor has an opinion, great, that's fine. We look at the doctor, he's the expert, but then we look at other sources as well. What are the other options as well? Anybody in this group who's done this? I have done it myself. My father, he was diagnosed with a problem with his leg, and he said that his leg had to be amputated. Every neurosurgeon in Islamabad, he said his leg has to be amputated. I then started looking at other sources, Chinese medicine, so-and-so medicine. Then I found a Hakim, okay, and he gave me one source that, try this. It's something like nearer to acupuncture. We tried that treatment. For the last 3 years of his life, he was fine. Okay. So anybody in this group, by the way, who's ever gone to a second source of medicine and all? Anybody in this group?
There's
Consulted the internet? Okay, I see some
WebMD.
raised hands. Wonderful. Okay.
Yep, WebMD.
So great. So you go to WebMD, you go to other sources of medicine. You look into other sources as well. So the thing about experts, it's this is a thing which is changing. Even the thing about education, how that is changing. There are so many professions in the world who are now being seriously challenged. Okay, so many organizations which are under tremendous stress. I mean, I'm part of a library group in Islamabad, and libraries are diminishing. When I grew up, library was everywhere. Going to a library was considered a privilege, an honor, and it was a great, I had a great learning. I haven't been to a library for quite some time, even though I'm part of a library group myself. But then we look at how are we going to, make libraries more relevant? Okay, so this thing about expertise, this thing about professions that needs to be thought about, right? If there are any questions, please, now is a very good time to, okay, second and third opinions for cancer treatment. Okay. Okay, now I promised you when I give the introductory video about this particular course that if there's a compelling question which you have, any particular thing which you would like to talk about and discuss about, we could discuss its future in this particular event. So anybody have some ideas, any topics you would like to talk about, anything, education, politics, post-COVID world, anything which you would be interested in, in exploring during this webinar? Anybody? If we could come up with some ideas, we could, okay. So Maureen says education. So you're looking at the future. What I would suggest is make it a bit more narrow. The narrower it is, the more easy it is. For example, education could be ranged from, let's say, online, primary, higher secondary, university education. If it could be a bit more narrower, it would make life a bit easy. Any other topics you would like to discuss? Then we'll make some breakout books and we'll pass you through pretty good. Okay, truly modernizing high school. Okay, great, thank you. That's a more topic which is more focused. Okay, that's one topic, is great. Anybody else who's got a topic in their minds whom they would like to share, whom they would like to discuss? Anybody else? Which decisions will my grandsons be making? Wow, now that is beautiful. That's a beautiful topic. Okay. How to use technology in the future? Banks be replaced with peer-to-peer services. All right, great. So we've got about 4 topics, which would, I think, would it helps all of us. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so we've got about 4 or 5 topics. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of this in a Google walking wall, and then we're going to break out into groups, and I'm going to pass you through a particular process of thought. And I'm going to give you some tools, and you can think about. So let's do this. I'm just going to shut off my screen for a minute. Okay, we have one more topic. Okay, what divides will exist among humans? Those without water? Wow, that's a great question. Okay. If all of you can watch my screen. Okay, so what I actually want you to do is that when you're going out into the groups, I'm giving you this free license. Now, what do you think the future will be like? So there are 2 ways in which we look at the future. So one way is we do it in predictability mode, that I think the future of banking is going to be this and this. It doesn't have a future, or education, it has a very, any prediction which you want to give. Second thing is what's called fear of the future. That's how we usually look at the future as well. I'm afraid COVID might exist more than 2021, or I'm afraid 2021 might be worse than 2020. That's my fear of the future. So feel free to give your prediction about it. So talk to yourself in groups. And this particular topic which you are going into, what do you think the future will be like? Give a few lines. It could also include your particular fear of the future. So for example, in the picture which you see on the screen, perhaps it could be an AI future, augmented reality. That could be perhaps a future. Perhaps in a best case scenario, we could have what's called a green earth, life might not actually be gloom. Or there could be a dystopian future. That is very much a possibility. It's something which has been explored in, SciTech and all. So when you go into your groups, take about 5 minutes and talk with yourself and set up one repertoire who can, just then what all you, discuss over there, you can put it over there. This is what I think the future of my particular topic will be. That could include your fears as well. All right. Does it make sense?
Oui, amor.
Okay, Fred, let's get on to breakout rooms.
I'm about to create 5 breakout rooms.
Everybody back here. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good discussion, and you had you were able to use your neurons of your brain and brain muscle to think about a particular future of your particular topic. So let's go by topics, topic by topic. All right, group 1, would you like to tell us about your topic and what do you think the future is going to be look like? Group 1, anybody?
I can start and then my group members chime in. We didn't elect a spokesperson, but we talked a lot about.
That's fine.
Okay. We were very
fine,
informal. But we talked a lot about, in the ideal world, our grandsons will have just more choice and sort of autonomy for a lot of different options. They'll have more paths available to them versus what there's been in the past with regard to jobs or kind of like college as being like the logical next step. Maybe there will be, much more paths. We talked about just choice on where to live. Will they have those choices of really being highly mobile and working from anywhere and, maybe working not even for one single company, but kind of transferring your skills and just doing that more independently and then having a lot more mobility to do that. Definitely technology came up as the sort of what are the realm of skills that you need. We talked about kids now not knowing how to turn on like a gas stove and just how things will evolve. Like what are the range of just skills and knowledge that you're going to need to navigate in the world is just so it's almost overwhelming. And then kind of just landed in the kind of in the more fear-based futures. Just will we be in a more a less democratic society, a more like authoritarian society? Will choices be reduced? Will we be making decisions based on scarcity of resources versus like abundance? And so those are kind of the main things that I remember, group, and then you should chime in, Diane. And
wonderful. That's great. That's a great discussion. I mean, I think you had a great discussion over there. What I would just suggest is when you go back to your group, just put in some of those things as your fears of the future and what you think you predict that this might happen, because we're trying to test our assumptions. Okay, so great, Kelly. Any other group would like to present what they did and what they came up with? Next group, please.
We were the last group, and I was with just a couple of wonderful women, and we talked about technology. And I don't know if we we were talking about peer-to-peer in terms of banking, and then we talked a lot about just digital divides in healthcare and other access to services. So will people go to banks and clinics anymore? And while technology can help enormously, we have to, really guard against the digital divide. And so we talked about the COVID example of really needing to be tech savvy to get a vaccination appointment. And we're focused on our elderly population. And so, are the systems we set up to provide the vaccines to those groups, actually allowing them to access those things? And we talked about a lack of, or just human-centered design being really important in the future related to technology, so that when we are thinking of solutions, we're thinking about it from the experience of the person that we're trying to serve. And we also discussed just that there's often a need to even talk about defining what technology is, because there's so many channels to to use. So assisted technology, lifeline devices, this vision of us talking to our watches and not even actually having to learn to use a device, but just being able to speak to a device and have it send us groceries and things like that. And then, the other thing we talked about is just alongside all of the innovation, we also have to be diligent on regulations for privacy and security. So, and then people from my group can definitely jump in if I missed anything, but it was a really interesting conversation. And we also talked about how similar banking and healthcare is in terms of just like how personal that is, and just there's a lot of commonalities there.
Wow, I never saw that similarity, but thank you very much. I think that's a great discussion.
I was in that group. Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, sure,
So,
Elizabeth, jump in.
The issue that, because I was raising the similarities, and what we look at, especially my World Usability Day hat, is that at the core, technology has a lot of similarities, and that if we solve some of these problems in the core technology by doing a user-centered design approach, then it can ripple out and it's transferable. So it's generalizable, because like we were saying, the issues with healthcare and finance, they're similar, right? They're personal, security, personal information. I could go on and on, like the level of importance of getting it right. So at the core, that's where the technology piece comes in. Anyway.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So very technology centered, think about the future. This is what you think will happen. And great. I mean, in Pakistan, we have similar issues. Over here, we have a big population, which is above the age of 60, but who were not very tech savvy. But COVID forced them into this particular field. So they are more tech savvy now, but there are now problems about, issues around cybersecurity, issues around identity theft. Those sorts of issues are now coming up, especially with the elderly population. So yeah, so really it's amazing how some of these innovations, they work both ways as double-edged sword. So thank you very much for bringing that up. All right, last group. There's one more group.
So our group discussed sort of the potential future in the context of scarcity and abundance, particularly related to some key things: water, food, housing. And I think we noted that disasters, whether the one that's going on in Texas right now, or from my own perspective of living in Cedar Rapids, which had a derecho last summer, that they're oftentimes pretty equal opportunity, and it exposes some very significant issues within the world. So on the one hand, we could be looking at a fairly dystopian future, especially with water shortage and the potential lack thereof, or how do we manage the distribution of that very vital resource. Or a different assumption might be that technology and the creativity of people is going to drive us to some potentially life-changing solutions. But I also know Mara kept coming back to your image of the ship at the beginning. And I thought, we talked about how whether or not, if people will come to the understanding that we are all on this ship together. And in some ways, we may not have prepared as well. So we're stuck with what we have. And can we do enough creating while flying, or, sailing, as it may be, to get to the solutions that because stuff like water, like you can't live for a long time without it. And it drives some of the poorest of human behavior, but the creativity could be the most inspiring. So how do we create a community that is broad enough that sees these as critical issues? So, and Shaban and Scott chime in.
Wonderful, great. You just struck a chord with me over here. Ever since the lockdown came in last March, there's a drama series I'm looking at. It's called Snowpiercer. I don't know if you guys follow it or not, but it's a great, I thought it was a great analogy for the type of situation in which you're living in. So it's like they're on a moving train. There are only 3,000 people left in the world. The whole world has just frozen over. But even within that train, they're always fighting. They're always fighting. And that's what this drama is about. And I couldn't, I looked at it as an analogy of what's happening in the world. That this is the pandemic, it's wreaking havoc throughout the world. And here we are, can't stop fighting. Our petty issues, I mean, if you look at them from a little far away, essentially petty issues. So yeah, just really struck a chord over there. So great, thank you very much. That's great. I wish I could take more comments as well, but we really pressed for time. That's always something which is going to be against us. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again. So great. So you came up with some, assumptions about the future. I'm sorry, and your particular view about how the future will work out. Now, our images about the future are usually going about almost anything. They're going to be saturated with our own biases, our own know-how, our history, the sort of upbringing that we came up with, being in the right place, right time, place, wrong time. That is always going to be saturated with it. I do a lot of work with the youth in Afghanistan. And when I talk to them about their particular future, one thing which comes up about them is that because they're the third generation which have seen war, and they see no peace in sight. The thing for them is, how do we think the future is going to be? Is it ever going to be peace in our place? I mean, so many forces around. What do we do? Okay, but then I ask them, could you check your assumptions? What else could happen? Then the things start moving up. That yes, actually there is now more maneuvering space. Perhaps there could be peace. There's a young population. There's for example, the American forces, they've been here for 17 years. But they want to move out. More than 19 years, they want to move out. The neighbors, they want to make peace. So looking at those assumptions, then their view of the future starts moving a bit. Okay, and for example, if you look at this particular picture which I've shared with you, it's filled with assumptions. Both of them are looking at the same thing, the same product. It's actually a product. They're looking at designer babies. The lady asked for a movie star with dark hair, strong nose, deep set eyes. She was delivered a different product. So what are some of the assumptions over here? Anybody? What are some of the assumptions over here? Anybody?
The movie star is a human being.
There we go. So the movie star is a human being. Great. Anybody else? Anybody else? Lots of assumptions over here, by the way.
Human beings are much more complicated than a few physical characteristics.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Anything else?
We put beauty in physical characteristics. We define it.
Physical characteristics. Yeah. Many other assumptions. I would just like to keep moving on from here. But one key assumption over here is we think that language is transparent. Okay. And most of us must have come through a situation in their life where there's somebody who said, like, you were in a situation, you said, I thought you said something else and I did something else. Okay. So she asked for something else. She thought she was being transparent. Message was getting through very, very clearly. The other person understood in a very different way, came up with a very different product out of it. Okay. So we think that language is transparent, but the way we perceive it. So for example, I'm saying a lot of things to you. We've had lots of slides with you. 16 people, there could be variety in which you're actually perceiving of these. All right. Your assumptions, you're bringing up your particular education, your design background, your social science background, your engineering background, that is having an influence on how you look at a particular slide or a particular thing which has been displayed to you. All right. So the assumptions, they then, when change in assumptions, the products, the processes, the scenarios, they start changing. And I'm just going to share a small example with you, an everyday example through which all of us have gone. Most of us have gone to some university or institute of higher education. There are two basic assumptions on which most of education institutes are based on. For example, our universities and colleges are based on there needs to be a physical campus. So number one. Number two, there's certification. If you take away the certification, many people will not go to the respective higher education institutes or to the universities. There is no certification. People will ask about it. Number two is about physical, about being, just a second. Okay, wonderful. All right, see you around, Elizabeth. Okay, but now if we tweak these now over here, we'll have a very different product coming out. These two assumptions. So for example, let me just share this. We've just been through Corona and a lot of our learning has now been virtual. Let me share an example from Pakistan. We have what is called a virtual university over here. And the top university in our country, their rector said, we will never hire anybody from a virtual university. It's against us. We prefer, places where there is physical space, where there's actually a campus. That is the real learning. Virtual learning is no learning. But last year, that gentleman had to bite his own words, okay? Because the last year has all been about virtual. So you must have been known of many courses or many, institutions which exist online. So there is Coursera, Udacity, even Zoom in itself has become a university in itself, okay? But the thing is that they also then give some sort of certification. The physical part is not there. So we just tweak the physical part. The other part is still here, the verification, right? Now, this is another sort of educational institute. What do you think this is about? This particular slide? What sort of educational institute is this? Anybody?
Buddhist or something.
Maybe some sort of a monastery, a madrasa, a temple, where actually think about these, at least the early parts of many traditions, of religious traditions, they did not have any certification. Okay, it's just the thing for them was that, if you are a scholar, why do you need a certificate? If you're a scholar, just go out yourself and, spread the knowledge, spread the love, all right? That's what the education was for many peoples. So physical campus is there, but no certification. This, by the way, is not a monastery, by the way. It's the logo of the Mount Eliza Executive Education in the Melbourne Business School. Now, again, why do people go to such executive education schools or continued learning? They're not worried about the certification. They're more worried about the skills that will emerge from them. So they pay a huge amount of money to these places, but they want the skills, the networking, the real life case studies they get over there. That's what they're more interested into, all right? So by tweaking the certification part, we come up with a different way of education, all right? And then there's another tweak to it. So there's this gentleman who runs this academy called khanacademy.org. His name is Salman Khan. What he says is, why do we pay him so much for all this education? Most of it is almost the same thing. So calculus is the same, different things are the same, geography is the same. So why do we pay for all of this? So he set up this global classroom. He's delivered thousands and thousands of lectures, and all of them are free. Supported by Bill Gates. This year, Elon Musk, he also donated $5 million to this particular academy. So no certification over here, no certification and no physical campus. Everything online. People just go here learning for the sake of learning. All right. So we tweaked the assumption of physical campus. We tweaked the assumption of a certification. We come up with this version of education. All right. I realize for some people this is a little tricky. Now, here is another form of education, okay, which has become very, very popular in the West, especially in the USA after the legalization of marijuana and weed, okay? So many courses now. I mean, McAllister University in Canada, one of the top universities in the world, even in their MBA program, they also, teach something about how to manage marijuana, all right? So a new form of education, skills-based, all right? So nothing to do with a degree, diploma, but more about a particular skill, all right? So new form of education is a new niche. So what we have done over here is that by tweaking the assumptions around education, we have come up with 4 different variants of education, all of them. And I'm pretty sure most of you have gone through some of these in your lifetime. So my learning and many of the people who I see today, they, I contacted them through Zoom, through these learning programs, all right? I've been to a university and I do a lot of my learning on these virtual courses as well. So yeah, great. And most of you might have as well. So what I would like to invite you now to do is that you go back into your particular groups and you have a particular vision of the future. This is what I think the future is going to be, or you have a particular fear of the future. What I want to invite you now to do is, what are some of the assumptions based on which you made that prediction or think about, try to anticipate this is what's going to happen. And if you tweak some of those, then what sort of future starts to emerge? Okay, so this is a little tricky. I realize it requires some brain muscle. And this is especially tricky for people from engineering backgrounds. Social sciences, they will understand this. People, with, philosophy and all, they will understand this. But people who come from engineering and STEMs, for them, it's a little difficult, to think about assumptions. Do we make assumptions? It's very, very hard for them to swallow. And just to make this case, and this is one thing, hang on a second. Let me just share this diagram with you as well. This, for example, was a diagram by Ford in the 50s. This was their image of the future. This is what the future is going to be. But the image of the future, within that image are the seeds of their own problems and destruction, which happened later. Okay. So within this image, there are some assumptions. This image is built on some assumptions, and that assumptions later came to bite them very hard. So so just to show that this isn't what I'm talking isn't just philosophy, it has practical implications. This is one image from 1950s. Anybody? What do you see in this image which could have led to problems with Ford or the big three in the USA? Anybody? Lots of assumptions here, by the way. And this is a picture from the 50s, all right? So it's a very different thought process over there.
Travel without a seatbelt.
Okay, you don't see any seat belts, all right? Great, that's wonderful. Okay, that's very observant of you. Anybody else?
The road is open. There's no traffic other than that one car.
No traffic, all right. Yes, open roads, no traffic. Okay, wonderful. Anybody else?
They assume people are driving cars.
They assume people would drive cars. That is beautiful. First time anybody ever come up with this, but thank you, ma'am. Now they're driverless cars. Any other things comes to your mind?
It looks like someone's making dinner.
The man is driving and the woman is cooking in the back.
Beautiful, ma'am. Beautiful. Thank you for bringing it up. In that point in time, the thought process was women would always be in the kitchen. So women would not drive. That's why they're such big, bulky cars. So Ford, the big three, GMC, the other cars, big, bulky cars, which usually women do not like. So if 1/3 of your driving force, you have not considered them in your design process, it will lead to problems. So wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else?
Looks like they have 4 tires on the smaller brown design there, which maybe will have flying cars or something.
Thank you very much for bringing it up, Scott. So the thing was big, bulky cars, because the thing was petrol would flow, fuel would flow. But then the era of, I was in Houston in early part of the century. We would always be having this debate. It should not go above $1. The liter gallon shouldn't go above $1. Now it's gone much beyond that, which led eventually to, President Obama, when he came into office, one of the first things which he said to the big three was, you need to scale down your cars. Okay. So their assumption was petrol would feel free, would run free. If you have big fuel guzzlers, that wouldn't be a problem. But that problem, those assumptions came to bite them later. All right. I hope this makes sense, because I realize that for people in engineering, it's a little difficult to swallow. But for designers, it makes a lot of sense. So what I would request you now to do is that, Fred, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I will.
What I would request is that you please go back to your particular things on which you were talking, the topics which you were discussing. Go back to what are the assumptions which you based your anticipation, your prediction. What did you base that on? And then try to see if you tweak some of those assumptions, what sort of a feature comes up. And if there are any questions, I'm right here. More than welcome. Welcome back, everybody. We're right towards the end, and I would like to end this. So what I would suggest is that somebody could just come up. You have 1 Japanese minute per group. That means exactly 60 seconds. So what are some of the assumptions in your particular predicted future? And what are the new scenarios which emerge? So anybody?
I wouldn't mind starting. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I threw this one out in our discussion. I think one of the assumptions that we're going to have to deal with is that there's a notion in a lot of youth. They think money is going to provide them happiness. That will be the secret path to ultimate happiness. And I think we as adults know that that's not it.
sorry. So how does that change the future scenarios? Okay, would like to see that as well. How would that change some scenarios about the future? Anybody?
I think one of the things that I'd like to see change would just be to put focus on the development of other things, as opposed to developing earning potential in a young person. How about just developing their humanity and their interconnectedness with other living souls?
Yeah, I think humanity and diverse creative skills are going to be valuable.
Wonderful. Well said. Well said. That's great. Yes, I always say that this money is a means towards an end, not an end in itself. So yeah, why just,
and in some ways, I think that, Umar, that plays well into what some of the things that we talked about. So I think the assumption we often make is that things will always be there, like, enough water, enough food, enough, all of these things. But we've seen that that may not always be true. So I think there are solutions maybe where we least expect it, and maybe aren't necessarily looking for solutions, along with you have to really redefine need versus want. And most of us live a lifestyle where we have far too much, and we could probably simplify our lives enormously. That would allow for resources to be spread across a larger arena. So
wonderful, 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 great. Anybody else?
I can share. Yeah, I'll share for group 4. We were talking about the technology divide. We had 4 main assumptions. One was around generations, older generations. It would be a challenge for them and not as intuitive. We talked about cost, being a cost prohibitive, that technology makes you feel disconnected and lacks human connectedness. And then we also talked about that people don't want to share information. They're concerned about privacy. And so we said, if we, change that and, those assumptions and recognize, generational challenges with technology. What if the older generation, you don't need to know how to use the technology, and so it shouldn't be a challenge or a barrier for adoption. Things can be done with a lot less, cost, right? Rapid innovation, multi-purpose devices. You shouldn't have to necessarily buy new technology. It should be integrated into existing technology, and that it can actually enable human connectedness. And then also, if we can guarantee security of privacy, that people are willing to share. We talked about if we knew, if someone says, hey, I can cure your cancer if you gave me all this information, you're a lot more forthcoming, right? And so we just talked about that being people are more willing to share if they know their information can be secure and private. Sarah, anything you would add?
No, I thought that was a good summary. So thanks, Teresa.
Okay.
Thank you, Teresa. That is wonderful. Thank you very much. Some great insights that come from this. And then I'll just get back to why I actually came up with this particular topic and what we're trying to do. I've seen a lot of foresight work, especially after COVID. There's been a lot of soul searching, people, looking at what the future will be like. All right. So now that is a concern for all of us. All of us are concerned about the future. There's so much uncertainty, and the way the world is going, at such a fast pace, the way different variables are, interacting with each other. It really is a very, very uncertain future. But for me, the point as a futurist, as a practicing futurist, what really has this point of concern is that I see that people rush towards scenarios about the future. They look at trends, start making scenarios about the future. This is what could happen. And the way we do, futures in our part of the world, and there's the Swalen Attila group of, and I'll put in his name right now. That's where I learned foresight from. We spend a lot of time on excavating and exploring the present. That is very important, because unless we explore those gray areas, those black spots, those, that extra baggage which we carry with us, unless we unload some of it, the future is just going to be a replication, just an extension of the present. That's what I usually see foresight work happening, and it is really very sorry, and I really get upset because then the future just becomes an extension of today, and it becomes problematic. So a lot of times which we spent by doing futures before going into scenario planning and planning by tomorrow, what do we need to do today? What's problematic today? So when you excavate that, then you unload a lot of load from your back, and you're more light, and then you can think with the future with a more open mind. So that was essentially it. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and you gave me 1.5 hours of your life. If there are any questions, I'm more than welcome to opening them, addressing them. This, by the way, is my email address and my LinkedIn account. I'm more than welcome if you'd like to contact me or if you'd like to connect with me. I also do a lot of foresight work online, and do a lot of consulting work as well. So anybody would be interested, more than welcome. But it's been a genuine pleasure. And thank you, Fred, once again, for creating this dialogue space. Open to any questions or any queries.
Yes.
Fred, over to you.
We have a couple minutes for anybody that has any comments or questions they want to make before we leave. A burning thought that you'd like to share?
Just Umar, when you made some comments about letting those assumptions go, and when you're thinking about a group of people that's coming together to do some scenario planning, like how long does it take, maybe like what's an exercise, or how long does an exercise take to maybe just get rid of those assumptions? How might you structure a conversation like that?
The thing is that the good thing which has happened during the past 1 year is that Zoom has made it so much easy for all of us, to get together. It's only a thing about how we structure ourselves, how interactive we make those presentations and these interactions. Usually, let me put it in the chat box. It's called the 6 pillars method. All right, you could have a look at it online. My apologies, I should have put it 6 pillars method of futures thinking, and you could just have a look at it, and it's very self-explanatory. But in 2 to 3 hours, we usually get a lot of work done on specific topics. We also look at scenarios within that time. So it depends on the group and the dynamics and the particular theme which you're talking about. Just thinking. I hope I've addressed your question. Hello, Sarah, have you? All right, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Anytime, great. Thank you for those great comments that's coming in the chat. Wonderful, really is enlightening, and thank you very much. That is the dream of any futurist, that if you could influence some sort of change in thinking, create a spark. That's what we say, light a candle, okay, and let that, let the perfume spread across. So it's been a great experience. Anything else? Anybody has any other question? Anything else in your mind? More than welcome to address. Fred, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amar. It's been a great way to spend the morning.
Yeah.
I know it's not morning for you.
Well, that's the beauty of Zoom. It's created this global community, people getting together and sharing ideas. I think I'm looking at this Google walking wall, and it's some great insights over there. So wonderful. Thank you very much for giving me a part of your brain and a part of your time. I hope it's a time which is well spent. But that's the beauty of Zoom. I think that's the one very, very good thing which has come out of COVID, that we've become a global community, true global community, able to share ideas. Thank you. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Fred.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.